Welcome back to Access Anime. I'm Henshin Ikeda, and today I'll be doing a walkthrough of Magi, Episode 2. Now, there's a lot of nostalgia when I did this walkthrough and review yet again because it has to do with Aladdin and Alibaba. It reminds me of Disney. But let's just jump right in. Now, I'll keep my comment and my rating until the end of this clip. Okay, last episode, we now know Aladdin and Alibaba are friends. That's where we left off. They were like on the turban that looked like a flying carpet, but it was a turban. And they were heading to the dungeon. Now this dungeon is called Amen. That's what the dungeon's name is called. And we find out that in order to enter this dungeon, all you have to do is touch it and you fall right in. And I guess Alibaba was self-explaining this to Aladdin, and apparently Aladdin is, well, he's hungry right now. It's like his stomach, after using his dajin with the flute, and again the dajin is called Yugo, took a lot out of him, so he's a little tired. And he accidentally tips over and touches Alibaba, and Alibaba touches the dungeon and he falls in. So we now know that they're in the dungeon now, and they were falling, and it was weird. It's like you could see what looked to be an Earth or a planet, like the dungeon just was like tear down and you see a planet and you're in space. It was weird, but again, they're in the dungeon now. Now we're taken to Jamal walking up the steps, and he's referred to as a sheriff. Now when someone calls someone a sheriff, I think Robin Hood, you know, the sheriff of Nottingham. So I guess that's what his position is in this country. He's a sheriff. Now back to Alibaba and Aladdin. They're now in what looks to be a cave. They're in water. You see bones and skeletons like in the bottom, and fire. Apparently, you know, the oil that's in lamps, that's the water they're in, and everything's like lighting up on fire. So that's where they're at. So they're kind of screwed, and they're by themselves. I mean, Alibaba finds Aladdin, but again, Aladdin is very tuckered out and tired and hungry. So again, he has to eat food to use his power, which is to call it the dajin, which is in his flute called Yugo. Now again, Jamal was walking the steps. It looks like he's going to enter the dungeon, but we don't know why, really. It's just weird. And again, throughout this episode, Jamal, or Jay as I like to call him, he is the villain, literally. And this leaves a bad taste in your mouth when you see what he does. Again, I jump ahead a lot, but let's go back to Aladdin and Alibaba. Now they enter, looks like another cavern within this dungeon, and it looks like they had an Indiana Jones scene where they have this rock or boulder following right behind them, and they just barely make it onto the ground, and they get attacked, but what appears to be giant green ants that kind of have like a spider back to them, but these are giant green ants, but they're not ordinary giant green ants. Apparently, Alibaba can cut through them with his dagger very easily, but they like morph into little like green goo, which forms up into a giant monster. We don't know the name of this monster, but it has 3 eyes, and it's crazy. It's got like swords on its hand, so it's kind of interesting and different. I didn't see that coming. But apparently Aladdin is still awake, and he's able to call the dajin, which is Yugo, out of his flute one more time. And a normal attack isn't going to work really on this monster, so he says, well, time to pull up my ace out of my sleeves. And I guess this dajin called Yugo has a power, like we don't know the name of this power, but his fist turn a certain color, and he just beats the crap out of this monster, and it turns out to be a puddle of crap, more or less. And that's where we're at there. We're taken to seeing Jamal, or Jay as I like to call him, and his bodyguard called Goltez, and they're seen walking down a path, and apparently Aladdin and Alibaba are like, they found a small place to relax and recuperate, but again, no food, so Aladdin just passed out. And again, Alibaba, he sees Jamal and Goltez walking down a path by themselves, just the two of them. And this Goltez guy looks like, I want to say Mike Myers from Halloween, but he actually looks like Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th with his mask and machete, but it's not really a machete, it's an Arabic knife, like sword. So it's kind of interesting. But I mean, this guy is huge with a mask, and we really don't know a lot about Goltez other than he's a slave. And apparently Jamal has tons of his men. that came with him into this dungeon, but they're all dead. All we're left is with Goltez and himself. And out of nowhere, while Alibaba was watching all this, Morgana appears out of nowhere. Scares the crap out of him. And apparently Jamal, or as I like to call him, Jay, notices, I guess, what's happening, and he approaches Aladdin, just passes him, and sees Aladdin passed out. And I'm like, what are you doing? He takes Aladdin, and apparently he knows who Aladdin is. He calls him a Magi. He's like, oh Magi, I finally found you after so many years. And I'm curious to see what Jay's real objective is in this one. I mean, how does he know him? What's he going to do with him? He just has Goltez put him over his shoulder, and they like walk, and he grabs the flute. Now, this is what I thought was kind of stupid, because Alibaba is like just sitting there watching, and he doesn't really do anything. And then he starts to, touches Jamal, says, wait, what are you doing? And Jay was like, I'm taking him. It's like, are you kidding me? Why are you touching me? Apparently Jay doesn't see anything in Alibaba. He's like, just a pushover. It's like, yeah, you're a low-life person. Yeah, who cares? And he tells Goltez to, take him out, kill him. And I'm surprised. You see Alibaba pull his little dagger out, and he's really good with the dagger, by the way. And he quickly does like a 180 or a 360 on this guy. Goes right behind him, got the knife up to him, and Jay's like, wow, I underestimated you. And this is what got me scratching my head. He takes his sword out and starts stabbing his slave, the guy named Goltez. Just starts stabbing him. I'm like, okay, you're in this cave, and you've got your slave Morgana right there. Apparently Morgana is now Jay's slave, and Goltez is Jay's slave as well. And you're stabbing your only bodyguard, which is pretty, to me, he looks pretty good as a bodyguard. He's well built, and he just keeps stabbing him like, you piece of crap. I don't really need you, but I feed you, I clothe you, blah blah blah. Stab, stab, stab. This is why some villains are just so stupid. You never abuse your help, because when you really need that help, these people aren't going to be there to protect you after what you just did. But again, I digress. We see Alibaba all of a sudden, I guess, make a deal with Jay or something, because Jay approaches and he's like, come with me type of a thing. And again, this is where Alibaba sucks up, like, has to swallow his pride and take the good in with the bad, and he sides with Jay's like, okay, I'll help you. And you see them walking through this cave, and you see some writing, and apparently Alibaba can read this writing. It's on the wall. It's Arabic. He reads the tongue of Tran, and Jay was like, well, you must have been well educated to be able to read. He's like, no, I just have a thing through maze and like labyrinths and whatnot. And again, Jay's not really, it's like, well, I was properly taught by a good teacher. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. And yet you still are checking Alibaba out, like how he's able to read this. And Alibaba wasn't being a smartass, but he was trying to lead Jay into a trap. Like, he misread the text for him, because apparently Jay really can't read it that well. But I know it's hard to tell right now in the episode where I'm at why he can't really read it that well. It's just Jay really misinterpreted it. He relied on what Alibaba was telling him, even though they both can read Arabic. And you see Alibaba, he's like, keeps walking straight ahead, and you see like tons of these like whirling fire pits and whatnot, and he's really acrobat, he's flexible. He just jumps through all the flames, gets to the end, and apparently within that little text he was reading, there was something about the path of the dragon. And you see him, after he gets through the fire pits and those whirling fires, whatever you want to call them, he puts his hand in the dragon and shuts off the flames. Jamal, Goltez, and Morgana with Aladdin keep walking, and they make it to the end. But just before the end, you see Alibaba engulfed in flames, and it looks like he's burnt alive, and that's all we see of him. And apparently Jay's like, oh well, keeps walking. And this is what I thought was very low of Jay. He takes the credit about saving Aladdin, because Aladdin is now awake. He now has a full stomach of food, and Jay was like, yeah, Alibaba stole your flute, he went up ahead, oh, and I saved your life. I don't know if Aladdin actually believes what's going on right now. All I can understand is Jay is a scum. He literally is not who you think he is. He's a horrible person right now, and he actually has the flute. So that's where we're at. And instead of sending his slaves to go like in front of him to go check out the next cave, he takes Goltez with him. He goes to check the next room out. He leaves Morgana behind to watch Aladdin. And it's funny because they have like a little conversation, and what we do is, well, what we get to find out more about is Morgana and apparently Goltez. Morgana, apparently Jay tells Aladdin that Morgana was a descendant of the hunters from the Darklands. Now we find out the Darklands is just a bad term, I guess, slave owners use, or Jay uses, to basically describe the Renem or Reham Empire. And then we find out it's actually the homeland of Morgana. It's called Scarthago, or I think it's called Carthago. And that's kind of interesting name. We also find out Goltez is from a nomadic tribe of the south. I think, no, it's the north. And he's also a mute, because you see a slash in his throat, so he's also a mute. It's because of an injury. Now, that's all we know about those two characters. Now, Morgana is trying to tell, apparently to Aladdin, yeah, Ali Baba is dead. I'm sorry. You know, she's self-explaining all this crap to him. And Aladdin at the same time is like, I'd like to visit your homeland sometime. And she was kind of, you know, a little shocked that he would. It's like, then Aladdin says, I'm going to free you again. And I guess Morgana's just not really used to hearing this kind of stuff. But while all that's going on, you see Ali Baba in a tower right above him. And this is when Morgana is telling Aladdin, yeah, your friend's dead. And apparently now Aladdin knows really what's going on. And out of nowhere, Ali Baba drops down and is talking to Aladdin, and then Morgana's like, you're back, you're alive. And then we do a small cutscene where we see Jay and Goltez fighting these other insect-looking creatures. They're different from those green ants. And it's funny because they're losing and they run back, and Jay sees Aladdin. Well, first he sees Aladdin looking at Ali Baba, then he sees Ali Baba. He's like, wait, you're alive? Kind of his plan to lie backfired there. So obviously Aladdin's not going to trust him anymore. Now Ali Baba's like looking at Jay, and it's funny, like the little one-on-one there of what they're doing. And I guess Jay still has Aladdin's his flute. So apparently Yugo, which is the Dajin of that flute, no longer belongs to Aladdin right now. It's in the hands of Jay. But that's all we really know. And apparently the reason why Ali Baba isn't dead is he misread. This is what I told you like a few minutes ago about that little Arabic text he was reading. He misread it to Jay for this reason. Apparently when you put your hand inside of the dragon to switch off the fire flames, there's something at the tail of the dragon that leads you to a different path. So he really wasn't burnt alive. So that was kind of interesting. And Aladdin jumps on his magical turban. He doesn't grab his flute though, which I thought was kind of awkward, and they just fly up and they escape. And apparently Jay is stabbing the heck out of his slave, Goltez, yet again. And I'm surprised that Goltez is still alive. I would have thought he would have been dead by now by how many times Jay's been stabbing him. Makes no sense. I mean, what is this guy built out of? But anyways, Jay sends Morgana to, I guess, take out Aladdin and Ali Baba. So she's really good with her feet, as Jay has described. So she's walks straight, well, not walk, she runs straight up the wall to try to catch up to Aladdin and Ali Baba, but no luck. She was just a little short. And she falls, and obviously Jay is not happy. But that was pretty much the end of that little scene of getting Ali Baba back, and Aladdin's now saved and has a full stomach. But remember, Aladdin doesn't have his flute, or at least that's not, I can't tell if he has his flute or not. I believe Jay still has it. But we're taken to what appears to be the gates, the final ending of the dungeon, and it's called the Gate of Truth. And there's like a little interesting shape in the middle of the door that matches the same shape that's on Aladdin's flute. And it has, now this is interesting, it has two, I believe it's two right hands on the door, so you have to use two people in order to open it. And Aladdin and Ali Baba open up the door, and the whole thing, like everything around them turns out like their surroundings change, and that's generally where we're left off. but it's funny, they say open sesame. Like, how do you guys like sync up and say the same word like that? But it's like straight out of Disney, literally. So they say open sesame and the door opens when they both push on the door. And again, everything disappears, and that's where we're left at. So, final thoughts right now on where we're at. We don't know where the two main characters are right now, like what happened to their surroundings. All we know is they're no longer really in the dungeon, they're in the ending of it, I guess. We don't know if Goltez is still alive after being stabbed for God knows how many times. And apparently Morgana, what side is she really on? Is she really a slave right now? Because apparently she's having flashbacks of her homeland and being free based off of what Aladdin was saying. So that's where we're left off with her. And Aladdin, apparently we know in order for him to use his power with the flute that has his Dajin in there called Yugo, he has to have a full stomach of food. So at least now we know where his limits are, but we don't know where his flute's at. Is it still with Jay, or was he able to take it back, or did Alibaba actually take the flute, as per what Jay said, even though we know Jay is a liar right now, so he is the villain. But we also know that Jay isn't the only villain. Apparently he has a superior or someone else, and Jay, he's in this for himself. Just because he was a sheriff, it wasn't enough power, he wants more. So apparently if he wins this dungeon, hopefully there'll be a big reward so he can increase his power and have his own country. So we know his background. Now I'm curious to know, are they going to finish this dungeon too? Are they going to die? We don't know. So those are my thoughts. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 on the rating, because it wasn't that bad. It wasn't a lot. I mean, we still have the same characters, so 4 out of 5. That ends it for my walkthrough and review of Magi Episode 2. I'm going to do a few more reviews after this. I think 4 or 5 more. So stay tuned for that. Comment down below. Thumbs up, thumbs down, subscribe above. Check me out on Twitter. Follow me if you like. And that ends it for my walkthrough and review of Magi Episode 2, like I said. So, without further ado, I gotta say it. Can't stop the access, but you can watch the feed. I'll see you later, guys.